Arizona Territory, 1885. The unforgiving heat of the desert sun beat down mercilessly on the parched land, creating shimmering mirages on the distant horizon. This vast, untamed wilderness had claimed many lives, and Vincent Young knew better than most that the frontier was no place for sentiment. At 25, he'd already buried more friends than most men twice his age, watching them fall to Apache arrows, outlaw bullets, or the land itself. The lesson was clear: attachments were dangerous. In his experience, caring for others only meant more graves to dig. Vincent adjusted his well-worn Stetson, wiping sweat from his brow as he guided his paint horse down a rocky trail. His lean, muscular frame moved in perfect rhythm with his mount, the result of a lifetime spent in the saddle. The shadow of stubble on his sun-bronzed face couldn't hide his handsome features, though few ever saw the warmth that occasionally flickered in his hazel eyes. He kept that hidden like a flame protected from the wind. Working as a cowhand for the Circle M Ranch provided him with everything he needed: food, shelter, solitude. No complications, no broken promises, no devastating losses. Just him, his horse, and the endless horizon. That was enough, had to be enough. "You are getting soft, Vincent," he muttered to himself as he guided his horse toward a small arroyo where he might find water. The cattle drive to Tucson would begin in 3 days, and he needed to clear his head before facing weeks on the trail with the other cowboys. Men who would try to draw him into their camaraderie, their stories of sweethearts and dreams of land ownership. Dreams got men killed out here. Vincent had learned that lesson the hard way. The sound of his horse's hooves crunching on loose rock echoed in the stillness as he descended into the shallow ravine. That's when he saw her, a figure crouched beside a small, dying fire, her head bowed. Vincent instinctively reached for his Winchester rifle, but something made him pause. The figure was too small for a warrior, and there was a strange stillness about her that spoke of exhaustion rather than ambush. As he drew closer, the woman's head snapped up, revealing an Apache woman with striking features. She couldn't have been older than 22, with coal-black hair falling past her shoulders in 2 long braids. Her deep brown eyes reflected a mixture of fear and defiance as she straightened, revealing a torn buckskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork. Despite her disheveled state, there was an unmistakable dignity in how she held herself. Vincent noticed her swollen ankle immediately, along with the makeshift travois that had clearly broken, leaving her stranded in this desolate place. "You speak English?" he asked cautiously, keeping a respectful distance. Yes, her voice was clear, her English accented but fluent. "I am Willa Deerfoot." Vincent raised an eyebrow, surprised by the mixed name. She seemed to read his thoughts. "My father was a cavalry scout. My mother was Apache," a simple explanation that told a complex story. Vincent nodded, calculating the situation. The nearest settlement was over 20 miles away, and nightfall would bring predators, both animal and human. The frontier's unwritten code was clear: you helped those in need, even if they looked different from you, even if every instinct told you to ride on and mind your own business. "I'm Vincent Young." "Circle M Ranch," he dismounted slowly, hands visible. "Looks like you could use some help." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why would a cowboy help an Apache woman? "Same reason anyone helps anyone out here. Today it's you needing help, tomorrow might be me," he shrugged, approaching her fire. "Besides, I reckon that ankle won't get you far." Something in her expression shifted, not quite trust, but a recognition that her options were limited. She nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. "I was returning to San Carlos Reservation." The travois broke. She gestured to the splintered wood. "I can walk, but slowly." Vincent studied the gathering clouds on the horizon. "Storm's coming, we need shelter." He looked around, assessing their options. "There's an old line shack about 3 miles west. We can wait out the weather there." He hadn't planned on company, especially not an injured Apache woman. Complications, exactly what he tried to avoid. But as the first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the desert, Vincent knew he had no choice. He helped Willa onto his horse, gathered what few belongings she had, and began leading them toward shelter, unaware that this simple act of frontier kindness would challenge everything he believed about survival and connection in this harsh land. The line shack was little more than 4 walls and a roof, but it would keep them dry when the storm hit. Vincent helped Willa inside, settling her on a rough-hewn bench while he busied himself lighting a lantern and stoking a small fire in the potbelly stove. The first heavy raindrops were already drumming against the tin roof as he returned from securing his horse in the lean-to. "Let me see that ankle," he said, kneeling before her without waiting for permission. The gesture seemed to surprise her, but she extended her leg, watching him carefully as he examined the swollen joint with gentle fingers. "Not broken, bad sprain." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a strip of cloth. "This needs wrapping." As Vincent worked on her ankle, he became acutely aware of her scrutiny. Her gaze held none of the deference he sometimes saw from women in town. This was the measured assessment of someone accustomed to danger. "You have helped Indians before," she stated more than asked. Vincent's hands paused briefly. "Worked with a few Apache scouts when I was younger, learned some tracking from them." He resumed, wrapping her ankle. "People are just people out here. The good ones and the bad ones come in all colors. Many white men do not think so." Her voice carried no accusation, just a statement of fact. "Many white men are fools," he replied simply, securing the bandage. "There, that should help." As the storm raged outside, they shared a meager meal of jerky and hardtack from Vincent's provisions. The silence between them was broken only by the howling wind and the occasional crack of thunder. Vincent found himself stealing glances at her, noting the way the lamplight highlighted the proud line of her jaw, the intelligent gleam in her eyes. "Why do you travel alone?" she asked suddenly. "Cowboys usually ride together." Vincent stiffened slightly. "Prefer my own company." "That is not an answer." He met her steady gaze, surprised by her directness. "Lost my family to Comanche raiders when I was 14. Lost my best friend to a bar fight in Tombstone 3 years ago. Lost a woman I cared for to smallpox." He shrugged. "Figured out it's easier not to have people to lose." Willa's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "My people say a man who walks alone casts a lonely shadow." "Better a lonely shadow than a fresh grave," he countered, then immediately regretted his harshness. "How about you? Why travel alone?" Her eyes clouded. "I was visiting my mother's sister near White River. Now I return to my father at San Carlos." She looked away. "He is dying." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Vincent felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry." "It is the way of all flesh." Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened around the tin cup she held. "But I must reach him before his spirit journeys to the other world." Vincent nodded, understanding the urgency that had driven her to travel alone through dangerous territory. "We'll head out at first light. I'll get you to San Carlos." Her eyes widened slightly. "Your cattle drive." "Can wait a day or two." The words surprised him as much as her. What was he doing, delaying his responsibilities for a stranger? Yet something about her plight stirred something long dormant within him, a need to help, to protect. "Thank you," she said softly, the first vulnerability she had shown. That night, as Willa slept on the narrow cot and Vincent made do with his bedroll on the floor, he found himself unable to sleep. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the occasional drip of rainwater from the roof. This woman was a complication, a deviation from his carefully constructed solitude. Yet he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision to help her. Morning brought clear skies and the sweet scent of desert plants releasing their moisture to the warming air. Vincent saddled his horse while Willa tested her ankle, finding it improved enough to bear weight, though still painful. "We'll ride double," he said, extending a hand to help her mount. "It'll slow us down some, but it's better than you walking on that ankle." She accepted his assistance with a nod of thanks, settling behind him on the saddle. Vincent was acutely aware of her arms around his waist as they set off, heading southwest toward San Carlos. It had been years since he'd been in such close proximity to a woman, and the sensation was both unsettling and strangely comforting. They rode in companionable silence for several hours, the desert landscape gradually giving way to more varied terrain with scattered juniper and pinyon pines. Vincent found himself pointing out landmarks, sharing knowledge of the land he rarely voiced aloud. "There," he said, gesturing to a distant mesa. "Apache lookouts used to watch for cavalry movements from there." "Perfect vantage point." "Yes," Willa confirmed. "My grandfather was among them. He counted coup on many bluecoats before the peace." Vincent chuckled. "Bet he and my granddad might have shot at each other then." "Your grandfather was a soldier." Cavalry lost an eye in the Apache Wars. He paused, then added, always spoke respectfully of his enemy, though. Said they were the best fighters he'd ever seen. Willa was quiet for a moment. It is strange, is it not, how enemies can become? She seemed to search for the right word. Not enemies, Vincent supplied. Yes, he felt her slight nod against his back. Like you and me, in another time we might have been trying to kill each other. Instead, here we are. The observation hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. As they stopped to water the horse at a small creek, Vincent noticed Willa gathering certain plants, carefully selecting leaves and roots. Medicine, he asked. She nodded. For my father. These herbs ease breathing. She worked methodically, her movements graceful despite her injury. You know much about my people. Vincent shrugged. Not enough, just what I've picked up over the years. More than most, she studied him. You are different from other cowboys I have met. That's so. You listen, you watch. Most men talk too much and see too little. Vincent felt an unexpected warmth at her assessment. My pa used to say God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. That earned him a small smile, transforming her serious features. Vincent found himself wanting to see that smile again. They made camp that evening in a sheltered grove, having covered nearly 20 miles. As they sat beside the fire, sharing coffee and the rabbit Vincent had managed to shoot, Willa began telling stories of her childhood, straddling 2 worlds, learning both Apache ways from her mother and English books from her father. He wanted me to understand both worlds, she explained, said knowledge was protection. Smart man. Yes, her eyes reflected the dancing flames. He taught at the reservation school until his lungs began failing. The agent respects him, allows him certain freedoms other Apache do not have. Vincent nodded, understanding the rarity of such treatment. And your mother? Willa's expression darkened. Died of the white man's fever 3 winters ago. She looked up at him. But she would have liked you, I think. She always judged people by their actions, not their words or the color of their skin. High praise. Vincent found himself wanting to deserve it. My ma was the same way. Pa was harder, especially after the Comanche raid that took my brother. But Ma always said hate was a poison that killed the hater first. Wise woman, Willa studied him across the fire. You have her eyes. Kind eyes that try to look hard. Vincent glanced away, uncomfortable with her perception. No one had seen through his carefully constructed walls so easily before. It was disconcerting, yet oddly freeing. The following day brought them within sight of the San Carlos Reservation. As they approached the collection of simple buildings and hogans, Vincent felt Willa tense behind him. What is it? He asked. Something is wrong. Her voice was tight. Too many people gathered. Vincent spurred the horse forward, approaching the crowd gathered around one of the larger dwellings. As they dismounted, an older Apache man approached them. Willa, he said gravely. You have come. Nakos, she replied, my father. The man's expression told Vincent everything before he spoke. He walks with the ancestors now, since yesterday morning. Vincent watched as Willa absorbed the news, her face becoming a mask of controlled grief. I was too late, she whispered. He spoke of you at the end, Nakos offered, said the eagle would guide his daughter home. Willa turned to Vincent, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I must attend to our customs. You have brought me far enough. Vincent nodded but found himself reluctant to leave. I could stay if you need anything. She seemed surprised by the offer, studying his face before shaking her head. This is not your burden, you have done more than most would. She hesitated, then added, but thank you, Vincent Young. My father would have called you friend. As Vincent rode away from San Carlos, the weight in his chest confused him. He had done what was needed, helped a stranded woman reach her destination. That she had arrived too late to see her father was unfortunate, but not his concern. He had his own responsibilities waiting at the Circle M, yet as the miles passed beneath his horse's hooves, Vincent found himself thinking of Willa's dignified grief, of the brief connection they had formed over their journey. For the first time in years, his carefully maintained isolation felt less like protection and more like a prison of his own making. The cattle drive to Tucson proceeded as planned, though Vincent's foreman, Henry Miller, had plenty to say about his delayed return. Thought maybe the Apache got you, Miller commented as they pushed the herd across a shallow river crossing. Nope, Vincent replied shortly, turning to redirect a wayward steer. Heard you brought a squaw to the reservation, another cowboy Dawson called out, getting friendly with the locals, Young. Vincent fixed him with a cold stare. She needed help, I helped. End of story. Always the lone wolf, Miller chuckled, though I never figured you for an Indian lover. The crude implication made Vincent's jaw tighten, but he said nothing, guiding his horse away from the conversation. The other cowboy's laughter followed him, but he found it bothered him less than Willa's absence. 2 weeks later, as they delivered the cattle to the stockyards in Tucson, Vincent found himself with time on his hands while the other cowboys headed for the saloons and brothels. Instead of joining them, he wandered into a small general store, drawn by a display of beaded work in the window that reminded him of the designs on Willa's dress. "Can I help you, young man?" The proprietor, a white-haired woman with spectacles, approached him. "Just looking," Vincent replied, fingering a beaded pouch. "This Apache work." "Indeed, beautiful, isn't it? I get pieces from San Carlos occasionally. They bring in work to trade for supplies." She studied him curiously. "You have an interest in native crafts." Vincent shrugged, just admiring the workmanship. As he left the store, a commotion down the street caught his attention. A group of men had surrounded someone, their postures menacing. Vincent might have walked on. Tucson brawls were common enough, but something made him look closer. With a jolt of recognition, he saw Willa in the center of the group, her chin raised defiantly despite her obvious predicament. Without conscious thought, Vincent was moving toward them, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "Problem here?" he asked, his voice carrying the dangerous edge he usually kept carefully sheathed. The men turned, revealing the town drunk, Pete Simmons, and 3 of his equally unsavory companions. "None of your business, cowboy," Simmons slurred, "just having a friendly chat with this Indian gal about the proper place for her kind." Vincent stepped forward, positioning himself between Willa and the men. "Looks to me like the lady was just going about her business." "Lady," one of the other men spat. "That's rich, she's just a—" "Choose your next words carefully," Vincent cut him off, his hand now openly resting on his gun. "Very carefully." The tension stretched between them until Simmons, recognizing the deadly serious look in Vincent's eyes, backed down with a mocking laugh. "Keep your squaw, cowboy, plenty of real women in town." As the men sauntered away, Vincent turned to Willa, noticing the bundle of crafts she carried, similar to those he'd seen in the store window. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her eyes searching his face. "I did not expect to see you in Tucson." "Cattle drive," he gestured to her bundle. "You're trading." "Yes, the agent allows some of us to sell crafts for additional supplies." She hesitated, then added, "I am staying with relatives in the Mexican Quarter tonight before returning tomorrow." Vincent nodded, suddenly uncertain. The protection he'd offered was no longer needed, yet he found himself reluctant to simply walk away. "Have you eaten?" he asked impulsively. "There's a decent Mexican place down the street." Owner doesn't turn folks away based on heritage. Surprise flickered across Willa's face, followed by a small smile that made Vincent's heart skip unexpectedly. "I would like that." The cantina was dimly lit and aromatic with the scents of chili and corn tortillas. In a back corner table, Vincent and Willa shared a meal while catching up on the week since they'd parted. "The mourning period is complete," Willa explained, answering his carefully phrased question about her father. "His spirit is with the ancestors now." "And you," Vincent asked, "what will you do now?" She traced the rim of her coffee cup thoughtfully. "Continue teaching at the reservation school, as my father did. The children need to learn both worlds if they are to survive." She looked up at him. "And you, will you always be a cowboy?" The question stirred something in Vincent he'd long tried to ignore, dreams he'd once had before deciding that attachment and ambition were dangerous luxuries. "Don't know," he admitted. "Used to think about having my own spread someday, small ranch, nothing fancy. But not anymore." He shrugged, "Dreaming gets people killed out here." Willa studied him. "Or perhaps not dreaming is its own kind of death." Her words unsettled him, striking too close to truths he'd buried beneath years of careful isolation. Before he could respond, shouting erupted from the front of the cantina. Vincent turned to see Simmons and his friends, drunker than before, confronting the Mexican proprietor. "Said we don't want to eat with no Indians or greasers," Simmons slurred, shoving the smaller man. Vincent was on his feet instantly, moving toward the confrontation with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to trouble. "That's enough, Simmons." The drunk whirled, his face lighting with malicious recognition. "Well, if it ain't the Injun lover. Boys, looks like we got us a race traitor to deal with too." What happened next occurred with the speed of frontier violence, Simmons lunging with a hidden knife, Vincent sidestepping and delivering a punishing blow to the man's jaw, the other three rushing in only to be met by the cantina owner's sons emerging from the kitchen. The brawl was brief but vicious, ending with Simmons and his friends being unceremoniously tossed into the street. Vincent turned back to find Willa calmly binding a cut on his forearm with a strip torn from her petticoat. "You should have left them to their foolishness," she chided softly. "Probably," he agreed, wincing as she tightened the makeshift bandage. "Never been good at walking away from a fight." "So I see," she finished her work, but her hand lingered on his arm. "Thank you." The simple acknowledgement, combined with the warmth of her touch, stirred something in Vincent that had been dormant for too long. Before he could examine the feeling, the cantina door burst open again, this time admitting the town marshal. "What's this about a brawl?" the lawman demanded, surveying the disrupted tables. The proprietor quickly explained, with Vincent and several patrons confirming his account. The marshal nodded, seemingly satisfied, until his gaze fell on Willa. "You're a long way from the reservation, aren't you?" he asked, his tone hardening. "She has permission to trade in town," Vincent interjected before Willa could respond, "and she's under my protection." The marshal raised an eyebrow. "Is that so, and who might you be?" "Vincent Young. Circle M Ranch." Recognition dawned in the lawman's eyes. "Miller's outfit, Henry speaks well of you." He studied them both for a moment. "Well, miss, I suggest you conclude your business and head back to San Carlos soon. Town's restless with the cattle drives coming through." After the marshal left, Willa turned to Vincent. "Under your protection, that was not necessary." "Maybe not," Vincent admitted. But it was true. The intensity in his gaze seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. "I should return to my relatives," she said finally. "It grows late." Vincent nodded, suddenly aware of how improper their situation might appear to others. "I'll walk you there." As they made their way through Tucson's darkening streets, Vincent found himself acutely conscious of Willa's presence beside him. The woman he had found stranded in the desert had somehow worked her way past his carefully constructed defenses, making him question the solitary existence he'd chosen. At the modest home of Willa's relatives, they paused at the gate. The sounds of children's laughter and conversation drifted from inside, creating a warm domestic tableau that contrasted sharply with the lonely bunkhouse awaiting Vincent. "When do you return to Circle M?" Willa asked, her voice soft in the gathering dusk. "Tomorrow, drive's done and Miller will want to get back." Vincent hesitated, then added, "But I pass near San Carlos sometimes when I'm checking the South Range." Willa's eyes held his. "Perhaps you will stop at the school when you do. The children would benefit from hearing about a working ranch." Vincent recognized the invitation for what it was, a door left carefully ajar between them, neither presumptuous nor dismissive. "I'd like that," he replied simply. Their goodbye was nothing more than a meeting of eyes and a brief touch of hands, yet Vincent rode out of Tucson the next day feeling as though something fundamental had shifted in his world. The emptiness he'd cultivated so carefully now felt less like protection and more like deprivation. Over the following months, Vincent found reasons to ride near San Carlos with increasing frequency. His first visit to the school where Willa taught was awkward and brief, but the children's enthusiasm and Willa's warm welcome drew him back. Soon he was bringing small gifts, a carved wooden horse for a boy who showed particular interest, wildflower seeds for the school garden, books that the agent had approved for the curriculum. Each visit deepened the connection between them. They spoke of their pasts, Vincent sharing the pain of losing his family, Willa describing the challenges of living between two worlds. They discussed books they had both read, found common ground in their love of the land, and gradually built a friendship that began to feel like something more. "You smile now," Henry Miller observed one evening as they sat by the bunkhouse fire. "Never used to see that." Vincent shrugged, uncomfortable with the observation. "Nothing to smile about before, I guess." Miller studied him knowingly. "This Apache woman, she's changing you." "Willa," Vincent corrected. "Her name is Willa." "Willa then," Miller nodded. "Just be careful, Vincent. The world ain't kind to those who cross certain lines." "Ain't asking the world's permission," Vincent replied, his voice carrying a quiet certainty that surprised even him. As summer turned to autumn, Vincent began to acknowledge the truth he'd been avoiding. He was falling in love with Willa Deerfoot. The realization terrified him. Love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant potential loss. Every instinct honed by years on the unforgiving frontier urged him to retreat, to protect himself from the inevitable pain, yet he couldn't stay away. Against his own judgment, he continued his visits, each one making it harder to leave. They began taking walks beyond the school, finding private moments to talk more openly. During one such walk, as they watched the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson, Willa asked the question that had lingered between them. "Why do you continue to visit Vincent Young?" He looked at her, at the proud, beautiful face that had become precious to him, and found he could no longer hide behind frontier reticence. "Because when I'm not here, I'm thinking about being here," he admitted. "Because you make me question everything I thought I knew about surviving out here." She stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "And what have you learned?" "That maybe surviving isn't enough," his voice dropped. "That maybe the frontier doesn't have to be faced alone." The kiss that followed was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered in the meeting of lips. When they pulled apart, Willa's smile held both joy and concern. "There will be those who disapprove," she warned, "on both sides." "Let them," Vincent replied with newfound conviction. Their courtship progressed through the winter, conducted under the watchful but increasingly accepting eyes of the reservation community. Vincent began spending less time at the Circle M, instead helping to repair the school roof, build new furniture for Willa's small teachers' quarters, and even assist with planting a community garden using techniques he'd learned from his mother. The day he asked permission to court Willa formally, approaching the tribal elders with proper respect and bringing appropriate gifts, marked a turning point. The oldest among them, a man who had fought white settlers in his youth, studied Vincent with ancient eyes before nodding his approval. "The eagle has indeed guided you both," he pronounced cryptically, echoing the words spoken about Willa's father months before. Not everyone was supportive. When Vincent announced to Henry Miller that he intended to leave the Circle M to build a life with Willa, the foreman's reaction was a mixture of concern and resignation. "You're throwing away everything for her," Miller warned. "The town won't accept it, the reservation might not either. You'll be caught between worlds." "Maybe that's where we both belong," Vincent replied. "Between worlds, building something new." The true test came in the spring, when Vincent purchased a small plot of land adjacent to the reservation with his savings. As he began construction on a modest cabin, word spread through the nearby town of his relationship with an Apache woman. The reaction was swift and ugly. One evening, as Vincent returned from purchasing supplies, he found 3 men waiting at his half-built cabin. He recognized them as ranchers from neighboring spreads. "Heard you're settling down with an Indian," the largest of them, a man named Harkins, stated without preamble. "That true, Young?" Vincent dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. "My personal life isn't up for discussion, Harkins." "It is when you're bringing shame to decent folks," another man spat. "Bad enough having the reservation nearby without white men taking up with their women." "I suggest you leave," Vincent said quietly, his hand resting near his revolver. "No." "Or what?" Harkins stepped closer. "You'll shoot us for speaking the truth. The whole territory's talking about how Vincent Young's gone native, how he's betraying his own kind for an Apache whore." The slur ignited something in Vincent that had been building for months, a fierce protectiveness for the future he and Willa were creating. In a flash, his gun was drawn, though not aimed directly at the men. "That's the last time that word will be used in reference to my future wife," he said, his voice deadly calm. Now get off my land before I forget the manners my mama taught me. The standoff lasted several tense seconds before Harkins backed away. This isn't over, Young. You think about what you're doing. There's no place for race mixers in civilized society. Then I reckon I'm not too interested in your version of civilization, Vincent replied evenly. After they left, Vincent sat heavily on a stack of lumber, the implications of the confrontation sinking in. This was just the beginning. The life he and Willa wanted to build would face opposition from all sides. When he told Willa about the incident that evening, her reaction surprised him. Instead of fear, her eyes showed a quiet resolve. My father faced worse when he married my mother, she said simply. He never regretted his choice. She took his hands in hers. But you must be certain, Vincent, this path will not be easy. Vincent looked at their intertwined fingers, his roughened by years of ranch work, hers graceful yet equally strong. The easy path led nowhere I wanted to go, he replied. This one leads to you, that's all I need to know. The threats escalated over the following weeks, anonymous notes left at the building site. Suppliers in town suddenly unwilling to sell to him. Rumors that a group of ranchers planned to run him out of the territory. Through it all, Vincent continued building their home, now with help from several of the Apache men who had come to respect his commitment to Willa and their community. The confrontation Vincent had been expecting came on the day the cabin was finally completed. He was inside, placing the table he had crafted as a surprise for Willa when he heard the approaching horses. Looking out the window, he counted 6 riders, Harkins among them. Vincent stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. That's far enough, he called as they approached. The men reined in their horses, forming a loose semicircle before the cabin. Harkins spurred his mount forward. This is your last chance, Young, he announced. Leave the Indian woman and this place or face the consequences. And what consequences might those be? Vincent asked, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. We're prepared to burn this place to the ground, another rider called out. Can't have our children thinking it's acceptable for white men to consort with savages. Vincent's finger moved closer to the trigger of his Winchester. I built this home for the woman I love. Any man who tries to destroy it will answer to me. 1 against 6, Harkins sneered. Poor odds, even for a man with your reputation. He is not alone, came a clear voice from behind the riders. The men turned to find Willa standing there, flanked by several Apache men including Nacos and, more surprisingly, Henry Miller and 2 cowboys from the Circle M, the lady's right, Miller confirmed, his weathered face grim beneath his hat. Vincent's made his choice, and while I might not understand it, he's earned the right to live as he sees fit. He fixed Harkins with a hard stare. The Circle M stands with him. Anyone wanting trouble can expect to find plenty. The standoff stretched into tense silence until Harkins finally spat on the ground. You're choosing Indians over your own kind, Miller. No, Miller corrected. I'm choosing what's right over what's easy, something Vincent here figured out before the rest of us. He gestured to his cowboys. Besides, I reckon a man willing to risk everything for love deserves a fair chance at happiness. As Harkins and his men reluctantly departed, Vincent turned to Miller in disbelief. Didn't expect to see you here. The foreman shrugged, heard talk in town, figured you might need backup. He glanced at the cabin. Nice place. Shame to have it burned before you even got to live in it. Vincent extended his hand, which Miller clasped firmly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Miller warned. They'll be back, maybe with more men. This won't be the end of it. Then we will be prepared, Nacos interjected. The Reservation Council has voted to extend protection to Vincent Young and Willa Deerfoot. Their union bridges our peoples. We will defend it. As the unusual alliance of cowboys and Apache warriors discussed strategies for protecting the new homestead, Vincent found Willa's hand slipping into his. The look they exchanged contained all that needed to be said: gratitude, determination, and the deep love that had grown between them against all odds. That evening, alone in their completed cabin for the first time, Vincent and Willa sat before the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls of what would be their home. I never thought I would have this, Vincent admitted, his arm around her shoulders. After losing everyone, I convinced myself it was better not to care, not to build, not to dream. Willa rested her head against him. And now, Now I know better, he turned to face her fully. The frontier isn't just about surviving, is it? It's about building something worth fighting for. He took her hands in his. You showed me that, Willa. You led me back to the part of myself I thought was dead. As you showed me that there can be bridges between worlds, she replied softly. That love can find a way even here, even now. Their wedding took place 2 weeks later, a unique ceremony that honored both their traditions. The reservation agent, recognizing the potential goodwill of such a union, agreed to officiate the legal marriage, while Apache elders conducted their traditional blessing. To everyone's surprise, a significant number of townsfolk attended, including merchants who had previously refused Vincent's service, now seemingly curious about this unusual couple. Henry Miller stood as Vincent's best man, a visible symbol of acceptance from the ranching community. Never seen you look so happy, he murmured as they waited for Willa to appear. Reckon you found what the rest of us are still looking for. Vincent, uncomfortable in his new suit but standing tall and clean-shaven for the occasion, merely nodded. Words seemed inadequate for the journey that had brought him here, from the embittered loner who believed attachment meant inevitable loss to the man who now understood that some things were worth the risk. When Willa appeared in a dress that beautifully combined white wedding traditions with Apache beadwork and design, Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. She was more than beautiful, she was his future, his home, his second chance at a life filled with meaning rather than mere survival. As they exchanged vows, Vincent found himself thinking of that day in the desert nearly a year before, when he discovered a stranded woman with a broken travois and a sprained ankle. How close he had come to riding past, to maintaining his isolation, to missing this chance at healing and wholeness. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the agent declared, his voice carrying across the gathered witnesses from 2 different worlds. As Vincent kissed his bride, the cheers from both Apache and white attendees seemed to herald something new, not just for them, but perhaps for the communities they bridged. The threats didn't disappear overnight. There were still those who disapproved, who muttered darkly about racial mixing, who predicted disaster for the unusual couple. But as months passed and their homestead flourished, opposition gradually diminished in the face of their evident happiness and prosperity. Vincent's knowledge of cattle combined with Willa's understanding of local plants and traditional agriculture created a unique operation. They began raising a small herd while cultivating crops suited to the arid conditions, using techniques from both cultures. Neighboring Apache families sought Vincent's advice on cattle, while white ranchers eventually began asking about the drought-resistant crops Willa had introduced. By the following spring, their home had become an unexpected meeting ground where members of both communities found common purpose. The school where Willa continued to teach part-time thrived with new materials and approaches. Vincent, once the quintessential loner, found himself surrounded by friends from both worlds, his table often full of visitors sharing meals and stories. On a warm evening in May, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Willa placed Vincent's hand on her stomach with a smile. Our family grows, she said simply. The wonder that spread across Vincent's face was matched only by the depth of love in his eyes. The man who had once believed that caring for others only brought pain now embraced the future with open arms, ready to love this child with all the passion he had discovered within himself. Thank you, he whispered, pulling Willa close. For what? She asked, her head resting against his shoulder. For being stranded in that arroyo, he replied with a soft laugh. For needing my help when I didn't know how much I needed yours. As darkness fell over the land they had claimed together, Vincent Young held his wife and unborn child, no longer afraid of the attachments he had once fled. The frontier that had taught him to expect loss had, against all odds, given him something precious instead, a love that healed rather than wounded, a connection that strengthened rather than endangered. The cowboy who once rode alone had found his true home in the most unexpected place, the heart of a woman who had led him, step by step, back to the courage to love again.